Hello and welcome to Rewind Review, the new sort of sub-podcast that now has a name. We didn't go 10 episodes before we named this one. We went 2, which is better. Rewind Review, so that's what we've settled on. Chris actually kind of, like, came up with this, and he gave so many good ways that title works, so I was just like, wow, can't really go with anything else, can we? Because I talked about
that's the thing.
Long play, because they're going to be longish reviews just because of history with Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and Space Jam. But also, I was like, that's kind of, we talked about that last week, taping these things on short play, long play videos, and it invokes VHS. But rewind reviews, rewinding has connotations of VHS, but it also rewinds your childhood, and then rewind because they're not current reviews.
I feel like it may change though, because neither we both went, yeah, that's fine. Like, no, we didn't go, that's it. Like,
yeah, we were like both titles would have worked. Like, I think,
definitely. And there was also Be Kind rewatch and NB VHS, which I did like as well. But the trouble is, I always wonder whether it's just us that call it MBS.
Yeah, not only that, but the VHS thing is like, I think then there'd be a connotation of we could only review things that we've got access to VHS, or a connotation that we would review the VHS itself, like whatever content came on that, which we just can't physically do. So yeah, anyway.
Especially because, and I'm aware there's a VHS revival, but as we said before, it's just bollocks. It's not a better, like, if people want them because they look cool, fine, but don't tell me that you want to watch the film in that quality.
No, it's a bad format. It's not. This isn't like vinyl, where you're getting a sort of a really you're still getting quite a high end, like, sort of a high fidelity version of the sound. Like VHS was the cheap, quick option to get these things into homes, and it was the best format they had for the time. But they were blurry. They would stretch. You'd get weird marks. Like they would get stuck, and then you'd have to use a pencil or a pair of scissors or something to wind them back in. Moving around in the film was always a nightmare. If it got, then you want to start again, you could rewind. It takes like 10 minutes or whatever. Like it was a bad format. It was not a good format. DVD took over for a reason. Anyway.
Yeah.
So let's get to it. So the first one, Chris went smart, I think, and he said, let's do something we both like. But when I think about, like, the movies of my childhood, the sort of top 5, top 10 maybe, let's say, films of my childhood, Space Jam certainly is the high end of that, like sort of around 10, 9. But then there's a handful of movies that are, like, much closer, things like Star Wars, Back to the Future. These are the movies that really defined my childhood. But there's one in there, in the really top couple, that I know, because you've obviously seen Star Wars, you've obviously seen Back to the Future, but there is one mixed in there that I know is just unique. Not unique to me, but, like, I was the only kid in my school that cared about these movies. Like, even then, everyone was like, "What, Short Circuit? What? Like, is that the silly robot movie?" So I thought it'd be fun for the second one to do the opposite of the one where we both happen to have a love for it, where it's a film I absolutely loved as a kid. But I was pretty confident. I never directly asked you, but I'm pretty confident you've never seen this movie.
No, I hadn't. No.
Not until last night, by the sound of it, when you watched it for this podcast. So I thought that'd be a fun way to do it. But I have to acknowledge this movie is. I still see it through massive nostalgia goggles. So I'm going to put that on the table straight up front for the listeners. I am definitely going to be reviewing this movie in a very biased way. I can't help it. I'm sorry. It's so much a part of my childhood. But two, I do think as well that, like, there's a huge problematic element of it. But let's keep chat of that till the end and keep it brief. I don't want to get too much into the problematic nature of Ben Javeri as a character and the relation to the Aziz bit from Indians in TV. Like, we can get to all that later. I promise we'll get there. But for now, let's just talk about the movie as is, and we'll get to the problematic bit at the end, if that's okay with you.
I feel like there's maybe more than one problematic bit, but yeah.
The big one. There's a huge one that made headlines. Aziz is kind of the reason that became a huge thing. I don't disagree with the criticisms. I just don't want them to dominate the conversation.
Yeah, dominate this conversation. Yeah.
In general, I think it's important to have these conversations about these movies. But what I'm saying is, I don't want them to I don't want them to dominate this particular discussion. I would like us to review this piece of nostalgia from my childhood. So I mean, normally at this point we would do your relation to the movie, but yours is non-existent.
I laugh at that because it's a little bit like, don't ruin my childhood, guys. We'll get to the racism, right? But I view this with the standard.
I know it's hugely problematic, and I totally agree with all of the criticisms aimed at the that element of this film. But I just think, like, for us to review it as a film in the context of when it was released first, and then get to that, because pointing out thing racist is thumbs up, great thing racist, but that doesn't move the conversation forward at all. Especially if thing from past. Like, we can't go back in time and make society different. And I'm not saying we can't learn from it, but I also don't think we should be burning these things at the stake. They're part of our culture. They're part of our journey to a more better understanding and things like that. But we'll get to that later on. So let's I mean, normally we would go here at this point into like our history with the film. But you don't have any. Have you even heard of this film?
No.
Had you heard of this film at all?
I heard the name, didn't know what it was about. I think maybe if someone would have said, what do you think it's about, I'd have gone like a robot or something. So I think I'd like culturally had come across it maybe. But no big. And like I looked at it wasn't like The Goonies. I could describe that poster to you, even though I've never seen the film. I could describe the logo to you. Same with some other classic films I've not seen. With this one, I wouldn't have been able to describe the poster. It wasn't in my zeitgeist at all. So why have you sort of described it's clear you love it. Is there any more to say about your connection to it?
Well, I'll tell you the weird way I came across the movie, which is that I saw the second one first.
Right.
As I've mentioned in the past, my nan worked at a video shop, and she got me a copy of. She gave me a pile of old videos that they were just not doing anything with, and it was like labeled, but there was no case, no proper case, and it was Short Circuit 2, and it was. And I had no idea what it was, and I watched it, and maybe at some point we'll watch the second one. It depends on what your opinion is of this, actually. I'm not going to force you to watch it if you really want to kill yourself after watching the first one. But I watched the second one, and it was just the most insane film. And even today, the second one, I can't believe it exists for so many reasons. There's so many... If you think this one is odd... Mate, the second film is literally insane. You're watching it going, how is this a kid's film? How is this for children? And as a kid, that made me feel very grown up, those elements of it. It is also silly and wacky, and it's about a funny robot, totally on board. But, like, there's also a weirdly adult element to the second movie, and fairly adult element to some of the first one, but particularly strongly in the second one. So I had a real love for the second one, but I didn't know it was the second movie either. Because, remember, I've got this half-labeled, not boxed cassette.
Right, yeah.
So I didn't even know it was called, I don't even think I 100% referred to it as Short Circuit. I think, because I was only like 7 or 8, I just called it Johnny Five.
Right.
It's the Johnny Five movie. Johnny Five, and we watched Johnny Five, and my mum would put on Johnny Five, and I would watch Johnny Five ad nauseum. And then one day we were at a friend's house. Well, I say a friend's house. I was a child. I was dragged to one of my mum's friends' houses. And, one of those friends they force you to call auntie, even though you're not related. Weird. Don't like it. And an advert came on ITV. I remember this so vividly, and it was Johnny Five, but it wasn't the Johnny Five I've seen. And he's in a bar, and he's charging through the bar and rescuing a girl. Who's this girl? What's this? Is this a sequel? What is this? No, it's the first one, and it was airing that night.
Oh wow!
And I was like, no fucking way. Like, not like that, but like in my child brain exploded that this thing I loved was not only the sequel, but like there was another one, a whole other movie I could enjoy of this character. And my mum had no intention of getting us home in time to watch the first movie. Not at all. We were out.
Oh shit.
I know, right? So I begged and I pleaded and I whinged and I moaned and I kicked and I screamed, and eventually she decided that it was just easier to do it. So she took me home and I recorded it and watched it, obviously, but I taped it too. And that VHS I then held on to for something like 10 years.
So were you watching it, and did you watch it and realise, were you like, oh, this is set before the film I've seen?
Yeah, because obviously in this movie, for those who don't know the premise of short circuit movies, I mean, the very simplest version of the premise is it's a robot that gets hit by lightning and comes to life, and no one really believes that, and he's trying to stay alive because if they dismantle him, he will die, and they think he's malfunctioning. That's the very basicest premise of the movie. We'll get into some of the other elements, the themes about militarism and like all that stuff later, but that was my like. So I ran home, I recorded this movie, I watched this movie, and I watch it like, oh my god, this is the first one because I'm seeing him become alive. That's crazy, and it was like this revelation. But also, it's such a different movie in tone to the second one. So I also loved it because it wasn't the same again. It was those two movies are very different from each other, and even to this day, I must say, like as an adult, if I see two sequels that are just too similar to each other, it really irks me. Like Die Hard and Die Hard 2. Die Hard 2 is a pointless waste of time because it is one again. You've seen the movie, you've seen it. It's called Die Hard 1. Why would you watch it again, but in an airport? Way less. Like it loses all of its luster. So I got this whole other movie with this character that I really loved. And then I wore that.
I'd throw that criticism at other movies more than Die Hard. I see what you're saying, but like Speed 2's worse for that. Like, yeah. And The Hangover 2 is potentially the worst.
Yes, yeah. I mean, yeah. There are dozens of examples. Die Hard's always the one that was the first one. I think as a kid I noticed that problem. The first one, because I loved the first Die Hard even as a kid, and I remember getting told of the second one quite excitedly. It aired one Christmas, and I think I taped it, and I was like, I couldn't stay up to watch it, but I got to leave the tape running and record it again, long play all the way. So I left it on, recorded Die Hard 2, and I was quite excited to watch the second Die Hard, and then I was like bitterly disappointed because I was like, I've seen this movie, so maybe that's why that example pops to my mind first. It might not be the strongest example, but it's certainly the first time I remember going, oh, I've seen this. This is the same. Yeah. They've done nothing different here. So I have a real love for this film. And that's kind of my weird history with how I sort of. It's odd to think that there's a movie that I saw the sequel to first. I think there's one other movie that happened with where I saw the second one first and then had to go back. I'm trying to think what it was. Oh, I guess we'll come back to it at some point because it might very well end up on one of these lists. But so yeah, that's my kind of introduction to it. So I've got to know, put me out of my misery. What did you think? Because you've got no nostalgia goggles, you've got no interest at all in this. But I still maintained to this day that they do a really good job investing you in this character, this robot, and making you care that he gets out alive. Like I still feel that's true because I remember showing this to Nadia many years later, and she really enjoyed it, even with the problems, and there are problems. And I think that is because at the core there is a very, very sweet story about this very innocent childlike robot. At one point he gets described as a 4-day-old. That's discovering he's alive and trying to convince these people that he is, and that not to essentially kill him. And I think there's something at the core of that is still very appealing and works even without the nostalgia. But I could be wrong. Maybe my nostalgia has clouded me very much so. So I've got to ask then. So what did you think?
I think I've thought a lot about it, and consistently confuddled is how I would explain my experience watching it. I think it is the perfect movie to do this with.
Yes.
Because like you say, I was watching it it's very on a par in a way with a lot of the stuff we said about Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Like, this is me watching Honey, I Shrunk the Kids without watching it as a kid. Where I was just like, for a lot of it, like, for me, like, I think because, like, I'm a huge fan of Only Fools and Horses, and that has some really shocking stuff. A lot of the big problem stuff you were talking about was like, oh god, that's horrific. That's so of its time. But there's also a lot of like just plot stuff and story stuff, which is probably no more egregious than Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. But because I didn't watch it as a kid, I'm noticing it more.
Right.
my big thing was that I could absolutely see why kids like it, and I did enjoy watching it. I did. And I can see why it captured your imagination. Mm-hmm. I just find it bizarre because it is. And if anyone's listening to this and hasn't watched it in a while, go back, because it is a kids' film wrapped in like an part adult film, part bizarre. So today, someone said to me, "Oh, did you watch Short Circuit?" I said, "Yeah, weird film," and they were like, "Great film." And I was like, I don't know, man. There's a fair amount of racism. There's, bizarre subplots. There's erection jokes. And they were like, there's not erection jokes. I was like, there's literally an erection joke.
Yeah.
And the amount of swearing, that's what really got me. Because I was like, there is a lot of swear. There's nearly domestic abuse. Like the ex-boyfriend goes to hit her. We'll get to the bath and the dancing, like yes, she does refer to him as a 4-year-old after flashing her boobs and then mimicking John Travolta's Sexiest Man Alive in the 70s dancing with him. Like there's a lot of, like I say, consistently confuddled. There's a lot of very bizarre elements to it, but there is also a lot of wonder, a lot of childlike wonder, a fair amount of humour, which I imagine is more humorous if you're younger.
Sure.
Military themes is a stretch. Whatever you said earlier, I was like, fucking hell, this dude loves this movie.
Do you not think?
I think there is, but the problem is, again, as an adult, you're going, these guys, what's this shoot first mentality? Where do these guys even come from? Like, they're so like odd.
Well, I think that's because one thing I didn't get as a kid, and I only really got actually as I rewatched it this week, and I was like, because when I was a kid, I was just like, it's the army. They're the army. They have army suits. They have like tanks and guns and stuff. They're the army. But when you watch it, when I watched it this time around, I was like, no, these are private military contractors. That's actually very, very different. They're a private company that are selling, equipment that they're building, soldiers, guns. They're arms dealers. They're a cross between science and military. And this. I mean, if you made this movie today, it'd be about drones, wouldn't it? And I mean, it would. It'd be because it's weird how relevant that still somehow is. That this idea that these poor scientists who are inventing these things. It goes back to when you think of the work of Einstein led to the atom bomb. It's this poor innocent scientist who is just curious about things, inventing things. I mean, they do it right at the top. Newton Crosby, played by Steve Guttenberg in this movie, has that scene right up top in the movie where he goes, "Well, they weren't actually originally designed. They weren't designed as combat robots to start with. They
were marital aids." Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the joke. But the point is though that they weren't. That he didn't want them. He doesn't want them to be in that situation. But because they're owned by this private company that are gun ho, that's why that conflict comes up. And I think it actually makes. They have that weird thing as well where the CEO used to be a scientist, but then he became a businessman. So he's torn between his prior life of sort of being a scientist and understands where Newton's coming from. But then you've got Scrota, who they have confirmed they only named that so they could make scrotum jokes.
Yeah. A kid's film. What rating is this film?
I don't know. That's a really good question. Should I look that up?
Because it's not me being sensitive, is it? There's a lot of swearing and stuff. And like I say, like a full-blown erection joke.
Yeah, he say, "I'm sporting a tremendous Woody right now."
Yeah. I was like, huh?
Yeah, what? I think it's Schroeder, and then they make lots of Scrota jokes or something like that. I'm trying to get that. Let me get the rating up because I've never thought about looking that up, but yeah, that's going to be interesting. I do think those themes are there though. I think look, it's a kids film, so they're not like the most overt.
If you look into it, man, you can pull out all sorts of themes. I was thinking, at one point I thought, man, why did she ever, date this knobhead, referring to the guy, and we will talk to him again.
Uh-huh.
But I'm like, I literally found myself going, well, you know, she takes in all these animals that are abandoned and lost in the street. She's got a 3-legged dog. Maybe she tried to fix him. Maybe she tried to take care of him. And in many ways, he's as broken as the animals. And I was like, fucking hell. Like, if you want to look into it, the themes are there. But it's similarly to Space Jam. None of the themes, apart from maybe learning and what defines life, and when is a robot not a robot, that theme is absolutely there and done well, actually. And yeah, so let's go to, well, have you got the rating?
It's for some reason I can't seem to find it, but you keep talking. I'm going to pull it up.
Well, let's. So these are the things. It's just as I remember them. Like, and again, lots of wonder. I can see why this film is popular, and I did enjoy watching it. And I'd be partly because I've seen the trailer, and I was like,
suitable for all.
Huh? That's bollocks. It's not. It's categorically not.
I suppose when you think about it,
bastard, these are all words that are used in that film.
Yeah, well, bastard's used in Harry Potter. Bullshit, closer to the line. But I think as well, when you talk about when he says, to be fair, the erection joke, he says Woody, which that's like, I don't know if a kid would understand that. I didn't. I don't think.
Yeah, but if you were sitting watching a film with a 4-year-old that you were told was suitable for everyone, and they were like, "Oh yeah, I've got a right bongy," and pointed at their pants, you wouldn't be like bongy. I don't. Well, they've disguised erection with a child-friendly word.
He doesn't point at his pants in this movie. He just says just says the word Woody, which could be anything.
You can't.
I think the exact phrase is, "I'm sporting a tremendous Woody right now."
Yeah. Yeah, okay, Dan. Okay, you think that's fine for everyone. Say it in a meeting. Next time you're in a meeting at work and someone says something exciting.
I was simply saying, if you said that in front of a child, I don't think a child's ears would prick up and you'd get awkward questions. That's all I'm saying.
I'm saying that doesn't mean it's appropriate.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I mean that's fine. I don't. You know, I'm not 100%. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm simply trying to maybe give some context for the logic that was used at the time.
I'd like to set you the challenge of saying it in a meeting.
We'll come back to that next time on review. Was it a rewind review? I'll come back and I'll be like, right, did it? We're not reviewing a movie this week. You can't win in that. We're not doing a movie.
You can't win in that scenario.
We're not I'll be back. I'll be like, we're not reviewing a movie this week. We're just going to plug the Patreon for an hour and a half because I've been fired.
Yeah, exactly. But you can't. Even if you did it, I'd be like, well, you wouldn't have done it unless you felt you were with people you could get away with. So
that's
fair. So the first thing I bumped up against, and it wasn't my big thing, but I'm just thinking through, is let's talk about the Newton character because at the beginning. It's literally like, come and speak to these people. No, I don't want to speak to anyone. You speak to them. I don't want to do it. All right, I'll speak to them. And then like a couple of scenes later, he's like, I haven't been outside in 5 years. I want to find myself a woman. And it's like, you've changed from one scene to the other. You could argue, I get it. You could argue scientist doesn't want to deal with the suits and the corporate nature of it all.
Yes, that's how I
mean he doesn't want to, have a life. But yes, it was like, huh? Okay.
Yeah, I could see how that might come across slightly contradictory. I took it as you've put it there, which is that he didn't want to do hobnobbing because hobnobbing it with the suits is like just I'd rather stay in this lab than do that. But of course, when it comes to the actual outside world, like where humans that aren't going to ask him about his fucking robots live, then he might, that's an exciting idea. Although, ironically, then all the conversations he ends up having with Ali Sheedy's character Stephanie are, of course, about the freaking robot.
Yeah.
So he didn't quite escape that. But yeah, point taken for sure.
I thought that character was good, though. I thought it was acted well. I thought it was performed well.
I think he's weirdly sympathetic because you sort of, even when he does the wrong thing in this movie, you kind of know how he got there. Like, and like even though that like when he first meets and he's really dismissive with Stephanie, and like it's just it can't be alive. It's like a toaster. It just runs programs. Like that whole shtick. Like he's being very dismissive, but. I will say to the film's credit that like they set up the just runs programs thing in an earlier scene so you understand that that's just his way of thinking, like by default.
Yeah.
So and that's his viewpoint. He's not crossed any threshold yet. That's how he feels about it. And as a result of that, even though I think if you don't have that initial scene, he just seems like he's being rude there and dismissive of her. But what you realize is no, he's not being dismissive of her. He's being dismissive of anyone at all who'd be trying to claim his robots were more than just a piece of machinery running a program.
Yeah, I will say, and a compliment I was going to pay this film, and there's two wrapped up here that I'll say now because it's relevant, is I think they play both his arc of accepting that Johnny Five is alive and their arc, him and her. I think they play both of those really well. I think in terms of him, they actually, a lot of times you don't get to see the pieces in a film like this, whereas you see him dismissive. You see him begin to, in his head, kind of clearly be thinking, You see him voice out loud, no, this happened and then this happened. And then what I really liked is it still then takes him an entire night, which is quite a funny montage. And, there's the jokes and the questions and the interpret this art and stuff. And you see him come to that revelation and it all feels natural and earned. And they actually do make you believe very well that character's gone on that arc.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. Because at no point do they let the audience question. Because there's two ways you play this. You could play this movie. There's a way you could play the movie where you let the audience question, is Johnny Five alive? But they never go down that route. They make it very clear to you, the listener, the viewer, immediately. No, you don't need to worry about this. He's alive. What he's saying is absolutely true. You now just have to be invested in whether everyone else believes that or not, because otherwise you'd be splitting focus, because you'd be kind of torn between who's right and wrong, and it would actually muddle the character arcs. I think if they tried to play that story. I think you can only really do one or the other. You can either make the audience question it, or you can make the characters question it. I don't think you can get both, because I think you might bump into conflicts there. And I think they were very wise in the scripting of this to make Newton's journey about coming round to that point of view that we, the audience, already understand. And Stephanie understands as well. That's important. And Stephanie understands. Actually, that's a big compliment. I want to play the movie. Is I will say, and me and Nadia both said this because she was in and out of the room as I was rewatching it the other night, and she actually at one point got quite drawn in and sat down for it, which is why I'm like, this movie still works in some ways. She got quite drawn into it. I think this is actually a bizarrely progressive film in its use of the female character. She has agency. She makes choices. She's 100% like. Female characters in movies of this era did not get to make choices for themselves. They were on the ride with the male characters. Whatever the male characters were doing, they were getting sucked into it. She's very much an active protagonist in this movie. She's making decisions. She's doing her bit to make the story move forward. And she's an active player. And I reckon it passes the Bechdel test as well. I don't think every conversation she had is regarding a boy. There are obviously conversations about that because she's in a romance plot, but there's conversations about her struggling business and the looking after the animals and her lifestyle and all that stuff I think it even passes the Bechdel test, and I think for a movie that came out in '86, that's actually pretty good.
Well, yeah, and the compliment I was going to pay their relationship is I'm racking my brain to think what film it was, and I can't now. But we were watching some film the other day, I think from a similar era maybe, and at the end, the male and female character, the relationship plot, they were like, I love you too, and I out loud was like, really? Like, it's been a couple of days. And so many films from this era do that plot, the couple rapidly falling in love, and isn't it great? Speed does it, all sorts of films do that plot. And you could say that this film does that plot, but I don't think it does. Like, he's kind of lusting over her and is like, she's great, da-da-da-da-da. Like, it's a kind of, he fancies her. He's seen her, he's taken by her, he fancies her. She's curious about him. And at the end, in a moment of high adrenaline, they kiss each other, and it's a kiss, and Johnny Five is like, oh, we'll get to that. But like those two, and then they go off together, and you don't get the sense that they're necessarily. It's not played as let's live our lives together. It's just like, I'm doing this, come with me. Yeah, okay, I'll come with you. Like it did feel very real to me, and it didn't feel overtly sentimental or unnecessarily, sentimental. I do give it credits for that. I was like, that's actually quite a believable story about two people that fancy each other. And I know I can't think of any other term to use because lust is too strong a term.
It's the difference between two people coming together and realizing they're interested in each other, and the difference between two people falling in love in the space of 24 hours. It is possible for two people to meet and in the space of a day or two realize they're into each other and want to explore that. It's less believable that at the end of those 2 days they'd be committed forever. So I think that might be the difference. It's that the movie doesn't definitively put them on the we're together forever path. It puts them on a we're going to try and make this work path, and that's and see where it goes, and no like crazy commitment or anything, but like that's enough, right? I don't need to know there are wedding bells in their future to be satisfied by that love story.
No, maybe it was it. Maybe it was the relationship in it. Maybe no, because I'd defend that by when you're young, you feel that way. I really can't remember now what film it was. But absolutely, and I think they do that really well as well. Let's talk about Dan, the boyfriend.
Yes.
What's his name again?
Dear.
It doesn't fucking matter, Dan. The character's pointless.
He's not pointless.
He is. No, he absolutely is. Frank. We already have a villain. In fact, arguably, we have two villain figures, the boss and the military guy.
Yes.
Every time he turns up...
Schroeder and Howard.
Yeah. Every time he turns up, it doesn't propel us forward in any way. You take those scenes out of the movie, it doesn't make any difference. The second bit that he's in, when he's like fighting Johnny Five and Johnny Five destroys his car, it's literally just a battle in that setting, and that they don't move setting, and then the other guys come along. I think that's right. I might be wrong on that, but he doesn't. If you take him out of the movie, it makes no difference. It's this weird, abusive side plot that just I was like, why is this dude here? He's stealing her animals that she's rescued to get the money from scientific research.
Yes. I don't know. I think it gives us more context for Stephanie's life and how she's ended up where she is. I think the idea that she was like this. I think it just says a lot about her character, his existence, doesn't it? Because she's like, she was paying for him. She bought him that car. Like he was this lazy lout that like mooched off her and is continuing to try and mooch off her. And I find the scene where Johnny Five pulls that car apart very satisfying because I'm like, finally, that guy's getting his comeuppance. I'm not saying
it's a bad scene. I just don't think it's necessary because I think you get... Because if anything, if it's telling us that about her, then you could make an argument for, well, should she be so giving and believing with Johnny Five once she accepts him? When she first realises he's not an alien, she's a bit of a dick. But...
Well, yeah, but at that point, though, she had... But what I love about that is she goes on a small version of Newton's arc through the subsequent scenes. So she goes from he's basically a toaster to the scene which I love, which is them two in her van, and Johnny Five, in the first time he says the sentence, Johnny Five is alive, and you see it in her eyes that she's like, no, that explains absolutely everything, because she's smart. She's a smart character, and she's also observed that machines shouldn't behave like this, malfunctioning or not. His behavior is more like a living being than a computer running a program. It's reacting to her in ways that just aren't possible for a machine, And when she describes some of the ways he's acting to Newton, even he's like, well, of course the robot didn't drive the van. What are you talking about? So I in terms of she does act like a complete dick when she finds out he's basically a toaster, or when she decides that's the case. But I think that's important because otherwise you don't get the satisfaction, I don't think, of her turning around to that at the end of the car chase sequence where with the van.
Well, also she wouldn't have, it propels the plot forward. She wouldn't have phoned them, etc.
Exactly.
Yeah, I see what you're saying about the boyfriend adding to her character, but he's barely in it, and I was just a bit like,
yeah, he's got like I think he's got 3 scenes. So he's there when she first gets back. Then you see the scene of him seeing her. Well, no, actually, isn't he how Nova find out where he is? He is. That's right. So, oh, by the way, can I just say, Nova, the stupidest company on the planet. Like, they don't think to keep an eye on her. Like, Frank, this useless lout, is like, I bet the robot's still at her house. I'm going to claim that reward. And yet Nova don't think of that? The company that designed and built the robot? Like, they've not got anyone watching her property? Like, no one? 0 people are keeping an eye on that as a potential way to get this robot back? Are you insane?
Yeah,
like,
weird.
what? So, yeah, that blew my mind. But when he goes and says, well, let's hand him and we'll get the money, right? And she outsmarts him, which, again, I love. She has a lot of agency in this movie. She sets him up to mention Nova, knowing that Johnny Five will lose his shit when he does that. It's very cleverly done. But yeah, without that, Nova don't know where he is, although you're right. Like, if you take him out, then the explanation is quite simply that Nova are watching her house.
Does he phone Nova then? I can't remember.
Yes, yeah. He says I'm gonna ring them, and they're gonna, and that's when they then come to hers.
Okay, fair enough.
But I agree with you. I think you're right, though. I think structurally he's not essential, but I do think he tells us a lot about the character, because you could skip that whole idea of him calling Nova and just make Nova smart enough to be there. Which is better.
Exactly.
Objectively, it's cleaner.
I don't think for 1 minute you'd have thought this as a kid. Chucking it out there. Let's address it, Dan.
Yeah. You got it.
Watching it as an adult.
Yep, uncomfortable.
Slightly sexual vibes between her and that robot.
Yeah, uncomfortable.
What are you thinking?
Yeah, didn't like it.
Weird, innit?
Weird, really weird. And I definitely didn't pick it up as a kid, and I don't even think I picked it up as like in my early 20s, which is probably like the most recent time I remember seeing this movie. It was like probably 8-9 years ago now. It's one of those ones that like I watched a lot, and then eventually like I let it sit on the show because I'd seen it so many times. It was like I could scene by scene. I can still quote nearly all the lines from the movie. Like as we were watching it, I was like, I know exactly what line is coming up next. It's really depressing, and that'll be even worse with the second one. But because I saw that one a lot more. So it's been a couple of years since I've seen it, and I don't remember feeling that uncomfortable about it on any of those viewings.
Well, people may be like, oh, I was just looking at it with a modern context. No, the movie does it. So he sees her in the bath. He describes her as beautiful in the bath and makes a comment on her looking different. And he
says, Stephanie, change color. And then he goes, I like, or something like that.
Exactly.
And I think the intention of the line is he's being friendly. He's trying to pay a compliment. He's like, you've changed color. That's nice. But you're beautiful. Like he's 4 days old. He doesn't. But how it comes across, forget context of modern or not. But how it comes across is pervy robot.
Yeah,
there's no way around it.
Then they have them recreating.
Saturday Night
like
Fever.
It's not. They're not recreating the group dance from Grease. Do you know what I mean? They're not recreating. Grease Lightning. They're recreating some sexy dancing from Saturday Night Fever.
Yeah, can I explain maybe why that was chosen?
Yeah, sure.
Same director.
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
So I think the intention and actual what comes out of it different. Like the bath scene, the intention was innocent Johnny Five trying to be polite and pass compliments because he's learning about human interaction. She's finding it awkward. Ha ha ha. Move on. Comes across very differently. Comes across as pervy robot. Totally, 100% agree with you. This one, I think the intention was homage the movie the director made previously. And it's like, they're having a fun little dance. These two characters are really getting to know each other and they're having fun with each other now. How it comes across... lady falling in love with robot that's pervy. Weird.
Yeah, because you have her arching her back and leaning back, and like there's a lot of like he's holding her in a very like intimate way, and like and don't get me
it's
wrong,
all because they're mimicking the dance from the movie. They just choose a different moment from that movie, maybe.
Yeah, and you have what was I going to say? I can't remember now. Yeah, just it's all very intimate. I was going to say. Oh yeah, that's what I was going to say. It is cool. Like and don't get me wrong, it's hot. I'm joking. But it is cool to see him replicate the dancing. Like, that's a good use of the puppetry
It's
and
incredible.
him and all of that sort of stuff.
Incredible.
So that element is brilliant, but if we're talking about the slightly weird relationship...
Yes.
And if you've got I think the intention was this. Intention this one, Dan. The reporter. The first question the reporter asks her is, did the robot molest you?
Yes! I brought this up with Nadia. I said, what the hell was that reporter smoking? I said this to Nadia. Like, why is that the first question? You found some government technology. Did it molest you? Natural first question. Natural first thing you think to ask, surely.
Yeah, and like when they kiss, he's like, "Oh, have you got one for me?" And like,
but you know, again, that one, intention, reality. Yes, agree with you. Totally creepy, very weird. Why would you insert yourself into that? But socially inept 4-year-old. Oh, they're expressing affection for each other. I love you guys too. Bring it in. Like that's the intention. Again, execution.
It
not
freaks
great.
me out in the context of this conversation that you're still referring to him as a 4-year-old.
He's a 4-day-old.
Oh,
but that's what I love about the movie, though, is that like forgetting the unfortunate way those scenes turn out, and I agree. Please don't think I'm defending them. I'm simply trying to explain.
And there is no you didn't manage to intention the molesting question.
Well, no, there is no intention for that. That is just insane. Like I called that out straight with Nadia. I said that is the most insane line of dialogue. I didn't remember hearing that when as a kid, but when I watched it the other day and that line came up, I literally turned to Nadia and was like, "What was that guy smoking? That was his first question. First question." Did it like no? You wouldn't assume that. Well, on what basis did that? Like, insane, just literally insane. But the other stuff, I think. For me, it's the 4-day-old thing is really important to this movie because to me, the naivety of Johnny Five as a character is so much part of the charm of this movie, or at least the character. And watching him learn and grow as the movie goes on. Like early in the movie, he refers to himself in the third person all the time. Johnny Five is alive, but at the end of the movie, he's not doing that anymore. He's saying, I am alive. That switch from being a robot with newly acquired life to being, and still kind of struggling with his original robot programming, need input, like not sure about anything, to becoming sort of a person. That journey is incredible. And the naivety that he keeps showing throughout the movie is endemic of that, and it makes the character charming and lovable because you're like, he just doesn't know any better. And then as he learns, you feel satisfied with that because you really do feel like that character's on a journey. When you compare how he first is in the movie when he's like, wouldn't you like to be a pepper too, to the end of the movie when he's having actual conversations with these characters and he's playing pranks on Newton, like when he ties his shoelaces together, like that's such a satisfying journey to go on, and the unfortunate side effect of that is that some of this naive stuff that they were playing, which to me is just an excuse to get Ali Sheedy in a towel. I'm pretty sure that's the only reason they put that in the movie.
Yeah.
In the back of the day, what do they used to call that? Something for the dads. Yeah. They used to say that a lot about Doctor Who as well, didn't they? The companions was something for the dads. It's like an old sort of saying from like sort of 70s, 80s. But the but the side effect of combining that naivety of Johnny Five and him being a child and not understanding the world and having jokes about that show his growth as we go, combined with that stuff, it just ends up coming across really creepy and weird. And those 3 or 4 scenes you've highlighted are absolutely the things that made me feel the most uncomfortable rewatching it by far. Like, we'll come to the race stuff later, but like that is absurdly misjudged. Like, it's embarrassing how misjudged that is.
Yeah, because that's the unfortunate, awful truth, and I've referenced Only Fools and Horses, Apu, there's stuff in Friends. It is not in any way a defense, but the racial stuff happened in a lot of shit, and it's awful and it's horrendous, but it was in a lot of films. And there is an element of when you rewatch it going, fucking hell, this ages it. This is a sign of the times, da-da-da-da-da.
Yes.
some of the stuff we've just talked about is like, I don't understand how that was a script decision even then. Like, I don't understand how they didn't go. Isn't it a bit just one of them, just someone in the writers' room going, should that reporter ask about molestation?
I can't believe that's in the movie. I paused it when that happened, this viewing, because I could not believe my ears. I was turned to Nadia. I was like, I reckon there's like a 20-minute stand-up bit about what was going through that reporter's mind that led to that question. Literally insane.
So yeah. Do you think did you watch it now and go? But I think the movie does a good job of explaining it because you know, with the shoe tying and stuff, is there an element of, well, when did he learn that? But they do such a good job of, he can ingest a lot of information very quickly. Once. Whether that makes logical sense or not, that is the world they set up and the rules they set up for themselves. So I think they do get away with that, and because, you know, he was watching TV all night. Well, actually, in terms of the night montage, sexy dance with her, and then he's making breakfast the next morning. Interpret that however you will. But
there's two nights, isn't there? There's a night before where he watches TV all night. The very first night he's there, when she still thinks he's an alien.
Exactly.
That's where he discovers the Three Stooges.
Yeah. So I think they did justify all of that, and like you say, the character development of Johnny Five, the voice work, and the puppetry of incredible. Johnny Five is brilliant. Well, I think it holds up as well.
You know what? I'm glad you said that. I really wanted to compliment that on this, but I was just like, I wonder if this is going to sound like insane. That puppetry is incredible, and 10,000 points to whoever gave him the eyebrow flaps, because they're so clever, because they're obviously there to be like shutters, like on a camera lens. But once he becomes alive and he can control them, and they're flipping up and down and not just being used like a camera lens shutter to keep light out, they use him to make him so expressive. Like when he gets freaked out and they shoot right up at an angle, or they can sag when he's sad. Holy shit, that's incredible.
There was a point watching it. The reason I say it holds up is because there was a point watching it and I was like, fuck me, did they build a robot? And then I was like, of course they fucking didn't. Like, this has to be puppetry. That's insane.
Yeah, it's a puppet, and you know what? It cost like something like 1.4 million to make. Like, Jesus. it was 1.4 million dollars of the film's $15 million budget. So
it's very surprising this didn't become a series to me.
In terms of a series of movies or a TV series?
No, a series of movies. Yeah. I know they did 2, but I'm very shocked there weren't 5 of these. Especially, like, I've seen the trailer for the second one. And I've watched the clip. I've watched the clip where Johnny Five arrives. Yes. And if they're literally in the sequel willing to go, well, Johnny Five got shipped off to help, then you could just do that in any manner of scenarios.
There is actually there was a plot for a third one. It was. Let me see if I can find it. 1 second. Bear with me. It was in my trivia, so let me just quickly dig it out, because we've come to it. So, oh dear, they got the plot away for the original Short Circuit 3.
Nice.
Wait. Where the hell is it? Oh man, that's really annoying. So basically, I remember reading it earlier today. Basically, he got sent to he gets sent to help out like a young boy whose like parents have like passed or something, like an orphaned boy. But I'm struggling to find what I remember reading earlier. Oh, here we go. So there was a script. There was a script for a third Short Circuit movie written in 1989 and then rewritten in 1990, but the producers weren't happy with the project and it was scrapped. According to Variety magazine in April 2008, Dimension Films had bought the rights to make that third Short Circuit movie, and the plot involved a boy with a broken family meeting and befriending Number 5. It remains unclear, however, if this movie was intended to be a sequel to the first two movies or an entirely new remake. But there you go. So there was a third movie in the works, but for whatever reason they couldn't get the script right, and then it just fell by the wayside.
It is prime for remaking. because you do it again and you get rid of the race stuff, you get rid of the sexual stuff, and it's a brilliant premise for a movie. Two people fall in love as they realise a robot's come to life and got life. I mean, maybe you couldn't do it now without, you'd be too tempted to go down the Black Mirror real life AI angle, maybe. It's certainly the unfortunate thing is the element of it that probably wouldn't work now is it wouldn't be lightning that kick-started the robot into life. It would be just a mad scientist, you know what I mean, overdeveloping, and that's less childlike wonder, I feel.
But two quick questions then. The first question is: so you turned this movie on, you had no idea what it was about. What were the first sort of 10 minutes of this movie like, where you were trying to sort of go, what is this? Like, where's this going? Were you sort of like were you trying to guess ahead of the film? Were you expecting the robot to be hit by lightning and become alive, or what were you expecting from the movie?
Yeah, well, I think the conversation with you of does he end up in a van, and I had picked up enough, once we agreed to watch it, to know there was a robot, and that robot probably came to life. I'll be honest with you, I was like, fucking hell, this is moving at a pace. Like, there's a real, you are straight into the world, and then lightning, and like, it's when he meets her that you're like, oh, okay, this is what the film is, and the film isn't actually robot gets hit by lightning and comes to life. The film is his relationship and friendship with this woman, and what that then means for the company that are after him, and so it kind of the pace settles a bit when you finally get to that moment. It feels like the first 20 minutes are powering through for that moment.
It does move at a clip.
But yeah, literally the first 10 minutes of the film, I'm like, geez, this is bounding along, isn't it? Like, I was really surprised.
I'm glad it does, though, because I think when I was rewatching, I was like, this moves at a clip, and I'm thinking, but if it was any slower, you're not getting to the bit that's really interesting quick enough. Like, I think it's actually kind of paced perfectly. Like, because what's interesting is Johnny Five and Stephanie and these character interactions. You really do just want to be like, okay, hit by lightning, escapes the facility, they're after him, he meets the girl. Then it's like story begins. Like, you don't want to take 30 minutes to do that. You really don't.
No. My other big thought was that ramp the ramp that he flies up to propel him into like the ocean or whatever, or over the ocean.
Yeah.
Like just even my sense of aerodynamics was like that feels like an unrealistic propelling.
The physics of that don't function. I agree.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Physics, that's the word I was looking
at.
Yeah, but it does tell you everything you need to know, and then just gets going.
Yeah. Yeah, and I will say that you're weirdly as well. Like when he first escapes, they do that really. It's a really inappropriate but also brilliant joke where he says, would you like to write the headline on that if he just destroys a bus of nuns? And Ben just interrupts with nun soup, and it's like it's horrific, but it's so funny.
There's a lot of that, and let's because we got trivia.
Talk about Ben.
And I'm looking forward to the trivia. Let's talk about Ben.
Let's talk about Fisher Stevens. So first of all, Fisher Stevens is the actor who plays him, and famously, a white dude browning up. Not acceptable in any way, shape, or form. Famously brought up in Aziz's Master of None show in the episode Indians on TV. And it opens with the scene of young Aziz watching that, not realizing it was not an Indian actor. And finding out years later, and then throughout the course of that episode, I rewatched it in prep for this. Of course, that episode of Aziz's show, there are two other Indian actors he meets who weren't aware that Fisher Stevens is a white dude, and he has to keep pulling out his phone and showing them. It's really funny.
I didn't realize that's what you were talking about. I'd forgotten that Aziz that episode.
Oh, right. So you're just going for the stereotypes are awful as well. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and so let me retract, and I feel bad for not noticing or realizing that.
No, you don't feel bad. No one. I didn't know as a kid. Most people didn't realize till many years later.
I'm watching it as a 30-year-old, but so can I just say, when I said that sort of stuff happened back then, I was referring to the stereotyping, not because that didn't happen so much then.
You are very wrong. That did happen.
Really?
A lot. Oh, and it's been happening and continues to happen in insane ways. Like I saw a Last Week Tonight bit recently about roles that would rightly go to a person of a particular ethnicity going to white Americans inexplicably, and that sometimes involves makeup and prosthetics and skin tone adjusting stuff, and it's still happening, and it's insane.
Well, it is. I still, as I said when we watched it, it still blows my mind. Tropic Thunder was not that long ago, and Robert Downey Jr. got nominated for an Oscar for that. That is nuts. That is crazy. Okay, it did happen, but I don't want it. I don't want it to, because that for me is so much more horrific now. Whether it happened or not, I wouldn't want. I didn't realise that fact when I was giving an opinion on it.
No, 100%. So, I mean, you're totally forgiven, because a lot of people didn't know. In fact, get this. This is a little bit of trivia early on. There was actually a lot of confusion in India when the movie was released, because many people who saw the film thought that the Fisher Stevens part was actually a Bollywood actor named Javed Jaffrey, who do look very similar, with the exception of their skin complexion. The only difference is the beard, which is what helped, I think, disguise the face. They just thought this Javed guy had grown a beard. He was actually a huge actor at the time. He'd had a big release in Bollywood in 1985 called Mary Jung, and he was a huge name, and they thought he'd gone over to America and made this movie. So you should not feel remotely bad for not knowing this. It is famously deceived a lot of people.
Is it the same situation for the sequel then as well?
Oh, yeah.
Because he seems to be the main character in the sequel.
That's what they talk about a lot in the Aziz one, which is that it was the first time Aziz saw on a lead actor that was an Indian character, and as a kid that filled him with joy and pride. And then as he got older, he soured when he realised that the role had gone to Fisher Stevens, who you would actually know, Chris, from Friends. You won't believe this, but you know Phoebe's psychiatrist boyfriend from the early seasons of Friends?
Yeah,
that's him. Playing Ben.
Wow.
Yeah. And look, here's the thing. I do think, and I said this to Nadia, I do actually think he's good in this film from just an acting perspective. He's got good comic timing. You know, he's relatively believable. The script, however, fucks him in every way, shape, and form, because it is full of stereotypes. There is one joke that counteracts that, which is when Newton's character asks him where he's from, and he says Bakersfield, and he goes, "No, where are your ancestors from?" And then he says Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Which is a great joke. But like, otherwise,
it blows my mind.
Otherwise, it is full of bad stereotypes that really hurt him. But let's just clarify here that this is not a dying practice. Like, Christian Bale and Joel Edgerton played Egyptians in Gods and Kings. Emma Stone, God in Aloha. I mean, that caused a lot of controversy. Gerard Butler, Gods of Egypt, the same problem. Like, Gerard Butler? Really? Like, come on. Tom Cruise was the last samurai. I don't know if you recall. Like,
yeah,
this
I saw that movie in the cinemas.
So this is not. You know, this is not a problem that has gone away. I mean, okay, people aren't as often, changing their skin complexion anymore. People are playing people from other races quite frequently. I mean, look at Avatar: The Last Airbender. Most of the characters in that cartoon are intended to be Asian in origin, or the Inuits, and yet the whitest movie made that year, with the exception.
Yeah, but it's the content of this as well, though. As you say, it's the references, the stereotyping, it's the dialogue, the dialogue in general between the swearing, and I've sorry if people, but I'm sorry. Bullshit and bastard are fine. Bastard was in Harry Potter. It's weird for a you. All the stuff that is said to that character, it ages it horribly and is appalling and wrong.
Yeah, and the way they use him to, like, a lot of the jokes that come from him not being able to remember the correct English terms for things. So the jokes are often at the expense of his inability to speak English. Like, there are a lot of jokes where, like, for the sake of Pete, for the Pete of sake, and he has to say it 3 or 4 times till he gets it right, and like, ha ha ha, he's speaking wrong, So, like, and while, and I think, and look, it's as I said at the beginning of this podcast, thing racist. I don't know, other than observing that and learning from it going forward as a society, there's nothing we can do about it. Thing racist. I can't like this. I could get a cardboard sign right now and march down the street or I could say that we should all boycott this movie forever and it shouldn't exist. But that's not the right way to approach these things. We have to look at them and observe them in the time frame in which they were created, when that was for some reason acceptable. And what's even crazier about this is the character Fisher Stevens was originally cast to play a sort of like Silicon Valley-esque, like a young, like programmer character, a white one, and then they changed the character in a rewrite, cast someone different, which this is funny. They cast an actor called Bronson Pinchot, and I read that and went, oh, they cast someone with actual, with an actual Indian background, maybe. And then I looked him up and realized that's Serg from Beverly Hills Cop, and he's pretty white. So the problem didn't go away. But then he couldn't do it, so they went back to young, struggling actor Fisher Stevens and said, "Can you do an accent?" And he just went, "Sure." So and Aziz has said this as well. Fisher Stevens is not the enemy here. He took a role, he did his best with it, and apparently he went to a lot of efforts to make it authentic. He spent a lot of time in India. He did a bunch of research. He lived with an Indian family for a month. Like, he really did try to get it right. He worked with a dialect coach. Like, he went to a lot of effort on his own back to make this work as best as it could. And he's openly said that if he was offered a role like that now, he would, of course, not take it. It shouldn't work that way, But there is an element of, other than observing it and acknowledging that it's wrong and making that vow to not continue making these mistakes as a society, there's not much we can do about it other than like that. So, yes, it's horrendous.
Well, and they can, the studio can choose not to profit from it as well. Like, they could, I think if they were to re-release this into cinemas or deliberately
I've got a pitch for you. I've got a pitch for you. Remake the movie. You know who you cast? Aziz.
Jeez. Wow.
Right?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And not doing an accent, not doing a stereotype, just Aziz doing Aziz. And he's the other programmer that's working with Newton, and you cast, like, I don't know, literally anyone. It doesn't really matter. One of the 10,000 white dudes lined up in Hollywood to be in any movie you want. But you give Aziz that role. You beef it up a little bit if you're doing the plot of the first movie, so he's not just a sidekick. And then, like, you can do the second movie with him as the lead, like they did. Do that. Why not?
Do you think Aziz would do it, though?
Absolutely. He loved that movie as a kid. It was only years later that he realised it soured
But I
him.
don't know if you could, as discussed, for the robotic AI element of it, I don't know if you could remake it.
Yeah, there's an element of... Yeah, but then maybe you make that part of the story that, like, instead of them debating that he just runs programs, they're like, well, is this AI or is this life?
Yeah, but again, I don't. That to me, it'd be too tempting to go down the Black Mirror route, and I wouldn't want that because of the wonder of and like, not. You can say, oh, just don't have the lightning. Like that poster, now I have seen it, and the lightning hit. It's magical. Like
it really is.
That's the appeal.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay. Well, that's insane. That's blown my mind a little. Blow my mind some more with some trivia, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, well, the trivia for this one is kind of like a little more reserved than the trivia we had for Space Jam, but we'll go through it. There is some.
Thank God, the Space Jam trivia went on.
Yeah, it did. I've cut this down. I've siphoned many of these off. We've already talked about the Johnny Five himself cost $1.4 million. As per the movie's attempts to portray a living robot in the real world, every single part of Johnny that was attached to that thing they gave it a logical purpose. Like if they wanted to add a piece to the robot, they had to identify what that would function as. So he's built for purpose, And obviously that's where they got the eyes from, because they were obviously designed to be the sun guards, the camera covering. So that's pretty cool. A lot of the tricks for him on screen, like flipping through the book pages, they were all done in camera. Using sort of simple, kind of ingenious, like sleight of hand prop effects. So the pages were actually flipped using an air hose. When he flipped the washer, that was flipped by using a piece of string. And this saved a lot of money, obviously, but actually proved surprisingly effective in making it look like he was interacting with stuff. The other thing they say is that whenever you see just his hand operating something, like his hand turning the window down or doing the OK sign through the door or whatever, that's because they couldn't get the robot itself into that position because of its size. So there you go. They filmed it in the same Oregon town as they filmed The Goonies and Kindergarten Cop. That's kind of nice.
Yeah, that's nice.
The sound of Johnny Five's laser firing may have sounded familiar to you. No?
A little bit. Was it like a lightsaber?
No, it's the same effect as the Ghostbusters proton packs powering up.
Well, Ghostbusters is one of these movies for me. I watched it as an adult, didn't.
I thought you were a Ghostbusters guy. Oh, okay. No, my bad.
No, I've only seen it. And Ghostbusters is the reason I have the theory of there are some movies you need to see at a certain time in your life, because I watched Ghostbusters seen as this epic, crazy, life-altering movie, and watched it and went, oh, okay, like.
I wonder if Nightmare Before Christmas is one of those.
Yeah, I think possibly.
So here's the other cool thing, right? If you want to give some credit, Tim Blaney was the puppeteer for Johnny Five and wasn't originally cast as his voice, but became his voice because he did it on set, and they liked the way he was doing it on set. They liked how that gave the actors something really good to bounce off, and they ended up using a lot of the audio from set.
Cool.
And then he got the role, obviously, to continue puppeteering him and doing his voice in the sequel. And he's great. He's wonderful. To believe he gives that performance while also operating that damn puppet, holy hell, the man's a hero.
Yeah, that's crazy.
The man is a hero. So there's that. So there's 2 points in the movie where obviously they did the El DeBarge song, "Who's Johnny," to go along with this movie, right? And the El DeBarge song, "Who's Johnny," the video for it is his Johnny Five theme video as well, where Steve Guttenberg blatantly wouldn't show up, so he's just a cardboard cutout in the background, which is my favourite part of that video.
That's amazing.
It's really good. Like Stephanie's in the video, Scrota's in the video, but like they get a cardboard cutout of Steve Guttenberg. It's so good. Wow. But the song appears twice in the movie, but it was only actually originally supposed to appear the once. The reason it appears twice is because they wanted to use the Dire Straits song "Money for Nothing" when he's in the Nova van, but they couldn't get the rights to it because it was too expensive, so they just used "Who's Johnny" again. So that's why that song shows up twice in the movie. I kind of like that one.
Right.
Anytime, yeah, I've already talked about that one, so that's the arm one. Apparently he weighed 250 pounds, which is 113 kilograms. I don't really know in real terms what that is, but that sounds heavy. So we'll just assume that's heavy. The original script actually called for extensive stop motion animation to be used, but the director opted to use practical effects. He thought that stuff looks janky.
Good move.
And I think it was a good move. I think it looks incredible. The visual effects guy actually was hired based on the merits of his work in a short film called Let's Go, about a young boy and a robot named Pal. The director himself is one of the cameramen when they show up on Stephanie's doorstep and ask her about being molested. Still can't get over that.
Nope.
The several clips scenes
maybe
in the movie...
maybe he should instead of dicking about wanting to be on screen and wanting to be a movie star, he should have been behind a monitor doing some fucking directing and pointing out that was a weird ass line.
Yeah, agreed. Oh well, the scriptwriter should have maybe not had that line in the script at all. But hey ho.
Every person at every step should have gone, huh?
Yeah, there is no way that line should have made it into the final movie. None at all. Like, it is absolutely inexcusable that got through so many people viewing it. It's insane. So, did you watch the credits?
Yeah.
So, in the credits, they have scenes from the movie, but they intercut a couple of scenes that were removed from the movie.
Yeah, I thought it was weird, because some shit I recognised and some shit I was like, I don't remember this.
Yeah, so there's a scene that was seemingly intended for when he was... still mooching about Nova before he gets shipped out with the garbage, where he meets a robot that's serving drinks. That robot was apparently actually called like Omnibot, and it was a toy robot actually manufactured by the company Tommy in the 80s. They deleted the scene because I guess it just didn't really do anything to move the plot forward, or it probably wasn't that funny or whatever. But they did stick the visual.
Probably would have made people be like, "Who's this robot?"
Yeah. It probably muddles things a bit. So the robot just sort of like, you see the clip in the credits of him interacting with that robot, and it sort of vibrates and doesn't react well to him, and you can't tell what's being said, but you get the idea. The other scene, and this one is more interesting, and actually brings on to something I didn't get a chance to ask you about. The other Johnny Fives, the other Saint robots that they send out to attack him, he reprograms them as the Three Stooges
Goons,
one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie. What did you think about that? First of all, that sequence where they chase him in the woods and he captures them, and then the payoff of him programming them as the Three Stooges.
I didn't get the Three Stooges thing because I've not seen the Three Stooges. So I just, like I say, I thought they were just generic movie goons. You know, they were
right.
Crab and Goyle, essentially, to me, which I thought that was very funny. I thought that was clever. I thought him taking them down was brilliant. I thought that was some of they're chasing him, he's defending, she's screaming, yelling, or some of those scenes felt a bit repetitive. That one felt different. That one felt like a bit more interesting, both visually and in terms of what it was doing.
Yes. I'm excited at some point to show you the second one, because the action in the second one takes an interesting turn. We'll come to that. The Three Stooges thing is because they specifically show him watching the Three Stooges.
Yes, it makes sense now. I just didn't necessarily put it together then. If it's the same dialogue, I probably should have.
Yeah, and when he's reprogramming them, he's whistling the Three Stooges theme. So he's whistling the Three Stooges theme as he reprograms them, and he actually makes them look like them as well. He gives them like the hair with the grass. It's really clever. But you'll notice that obviously there's 5 of these robots. There are 3 Stooges. You're probably thinking, where's the remaining robot, right? So that's what the other deleted scene is, and you can see some of it in the credits, which is him in a scrapyard fighting the remaining robot.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
So where that scene exactly took place, I'm not sure. Was it before the Three Stooges one? After? Completely unclear where in the movie that would have landed originally. But you can see shots of him in a scrapyard being followed by another red-eyed Saint robot. Presumably either number 1 or whichever number was missing from the 3 that he reprograms later in the film. So there you go.
Cool.
Cool. I've already mentioned that the director also directed Thingy. Oh yeah, here's an interesting one. Fisher Stevens' character Ben has Javeri is his surname in the second one, but it's Jabituya in this one. It changes between the 2 movies for no real reason.
Oh, that they changed. Okay. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everyone thought it was this. Everyone thought it was this Bollywood actor. Should we? I know it's a bit harsh, but should we maybe recast the character and make it the Bollywood actor? Nah. Let's change. Let's change the surname.
But
why? To make it a bit less Indian. Oh,
well,
okay. Do you think maybe we should make the character a bit more Indian? No.
What I love about that is that there's this weird thing of like, I can't tell if the reason they changed the name was because they just didn't bother to look up what his surname was in the first movie, or if the joke was that no one can pronounce it so it comes out differently every time, in which case that's offensive. So it's either laziness or offensiveness. I'm not sure which.
Does the stereotyping continue in the second one then?
Yes, but not as bad, because what they do quite cleverly in the second one is they actually, and this is a small spoiler, but his story and Johnny Five's story actually intersect in a really nice way in the second one, because he's trying to become an American citizen, and Johnny Five is trying to basically prove to society that he's a person and a citizen, and he wants to be. So these sort of go
no
on
longer being hunted then.
Sorry?
He's no longer being hunted.
Well, no, because they thought they'd get him. Oh, we should talk about that ending, actually. It's pretty clever. They do...
it's very clever, yeah.
Yeah, so Nova are chasing him, and Johnny Five comes out of the back of the van and he drives away, and the helicopters chase him, and there's a bit of lens flare, which annoys me. If you do lens flare, do it through the whole movie. Don't do random bit of lens flare. It takes me right out of the movie. I'm like, I'm looking through a camera. I'm not in it. Terrible. Anyway, DOP should have been fired for that. No, he shouldn't. It's ridiculous. But like, no, it's not great. But they blow up the Johnny Five, and as a kid, I was like gutted and confused, because I was like, he's in the next one. What? So what's going on? And then the reveal that he built very quickly, because we've established how good he is with this sort of stuff, like a mock of himself, and sent it out, and Nova are under the impression they blew it up. And there's this really weirdly powerful but kind of horrific moment when the Nova guys are walking back past Stephanie and Newton, and they've got like Johnny Five's head in his arm, because at that point you don't know he survived, and Stephanie feels sick to her stomach at seeing that, and you feel it with her. It's really powerfully done. And the reveal is, of course, that Johnny Five very much tricked Nova. He created a facsimile, like a shell of himself that they blew up, and he actually carried on.
which I thought was a really clever ending. One element of it that I was like, was when she was like, "I'm sorry you lost your job, but I think it's really good that you quit Nova." And it's like, okay, yeah, quit Nova, and stole the van, or like, or went, right, I'm quitting, and they went, fair enough. You know what? Take the van.
Yeah, I thought that because obviously they have to have that van because that's where Johnny Five is hiding for the reveal to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
So the writers were really stuck between a rock and a hard place there because if he gets in his own van or like some other vehicle, then you can't do the twist ending at all. It doesn't work. So they had to have him essentially steal the Nova van, which they made a real fuss about earlier in the movie.
Yeah, there's literally a bit where he's like, if you don't return my van now, I'm going to... And, like, we don't hear the end because Johnny Five lasers it off. Like, it's just like, all right.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's a bit of an odd one. But, yeah, that sort of stuff, I think, in, like, a kid's movie from this time, you sort of, like, you just about get away with. But it, like...
Oh, you do. Yeah, absolutely you do.
But so it's a nitpick, but it's, like, a valid one. Like, it does make sense. You're right to point that out. The movie that Johnny Five is watching, featuring George Raft, that he imitates flipping the coin, that's actually the original 1932 Scarface, which I did not know until I read the trivia, and that's really interesting. I've never seen the original 1932 Scarface. I've only ever seen, obviously, the 80s remake, so that's really interesting. Apparently, the Soviet T-72 tank destroyed by the robots during the testing demonstration right at the beginning of the movie had to be a fiberglass mock-up of that, because... well, actually, of a US one, because they couldn't get hold of the real life Soviet one because this was actually made during the Cold War, and so they had to do a facsimile of it. They couldn't actually get hold of the shape design or any props that would match that. That's pretty interesting.
Wow.
Yeah. So the scene where he's flipping the coin is actually manipulated with a wire. That's how the coin flips. But then they also reverse the footage to make it go back up and then back up down again. And apparently they do that a couple of times. It's kind of obvious if you watch the bushes in the background, which sway one way and then awkwardly sway back. So you can kind of tell if you do that. But they get away with it. I didn't notice it till I read the trivia.
I think they get away with all of that, as we said earlier.
Yeah, it's great. When number 5 commandeered Ben and Novagard's truck, he hums the U.S. Marines anthem, which I thought was a nice little touch. His full designation is Saint number 5. The acronym SAINT stands for Strategic Artificially Intelligent Nuclear Transport. There you go.
Nice.
We talked about the Three Stooges. Oh, obviously, this was a reuniting of a sort. Steve Guttenberg and G.W. Bailey, who plays Schroeder in this, appeared in Police Academy. Cool. Steve Guttenberg, obviously, the young police officer, and Schroeder, sort of the sergeant guy that they're always like, they're always at each other's throats, and it was like a bit of a Police Academy reunion. Weirdly enough, the year after this came out, they then actually reunited in Police Academy 4. It was the first time they'd been on screen in a Police Academy movie since the first one, so that was kind of cool.
Yeah, it does, because I remember watching and enjoying those films as a kid, but I'd love to, like, almost, but you wouldn't want to just rewatch one, you'd want to rewatch all 7 and just see, like, who stayed, who went, who, you know what I mean? Like, yes. Oh, this one was this movie, this one was that movie.
Yeah. I'd be curious about that, but it's a lot of work, and I reckon they probably aren't good. I'm not sure.
I'm not suggesting we do it for this, but yeah.
Little bit of Terminator stuff. They apparently kind of took some inspiration from the future battle scenes in the first Terminator, where those big treadmilled robots were going over the skulls. They liked the mobility of the treadmills. It was kind of part of the inspiration for Johnny Five's all-terrain design. And they homaged that in the opening scene of the movie when you get the close-up of a flower on the green field and the tank rolls over them, which is, it's framed to be exactly the skull shot from the first Terminator, which the tank then rolls over. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah, makes sense.
That's all the triv.
Cool. There we go. Good triv.
I thought, yeah, there's a couple of good ones.
How do you want to do this, Dan? Do you want to go into each episode knowing, having an idea and saying what the next one is, or? Well,
you're choosing the next one, and do you already know? Because you were very indecisive last time, and I had to just basically yell at you until you chose.
I reckon I got an instinct, and just saying something now and sticking with it would be a good way of going, I think.
Great, let's hear it then. What's next? So I chose this one, you chose Space Jam last week. What are we watching next time we do this?
We're going to watch Mouse Hunt.
Mouse Hunt, excellent, yes.
Have you seen Mouse Hunt?
Yeah, I saw it when it came out. I don't think I've seen it since.
No, I don't think I've. Other than rewatching it a lot on video as a kid, I haven't seen it.
So I think I saw it in theater, and then I think I saw it once more when it hit Sky Movies, because my auntie had Sky Movies, and I spent an afternoon at hers and was able to watch it that way. I don't think I ever owned this on video.
I had it on video. Yeah. But I was a massive Lee Evans fan.
I really am curious if it holds up at all.
I have no idea whether it will. No idea. It's
because
part of the reason.
I remember it being such a slapsticky movie.
Incredibly so. That's all I remember. That I remember the ending, and I remember the beginning.
All I remember is the nail gun sequence.
That first scene. The what?
The nail gun sequence. That's all I remember.
Really? You don't remember the beginning and the trap sequence as well?
I just... as you said that, yes. Isn't there a scene where he lays out 1,000 traps? And then he falls on one and he rolls through all of them or something like that.
And the beginning has this really slapstick. The body, I can't remember if it's the body or the whole coffin, but doesn't the coffin fall and the body like flips out and goes down a drain? Like
I don't remember, but that's a movie that I really have no idea if that will hold up at all. But I'm curious.
Me neither, and that's why I'm picking it, because I feel like we've done something we both liked. But we're kind of like, we've done, but there's an awful lot of nostalgia for. We've done something that's very specific to you, a movie that like we've both seen, but can't really remember and won't know if it holds up. I think is a different angle. So right. I'm gonna keep Good Burger on the back burner. Don't worry, it's coming. And Burger on the burner, and we're gonna do Mouse Hunt.
Yeah, I'm really excited because I think towards Christmas, if we get a chance to do one of these around Christmas, I'm definitely gonna make you watch Gremlins. Because that's a Christmas movie and a great movie that you've not seen. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, I've not seen Gremlins. There's a lot of pressure for you to pick. I might pick it one day, but I don't know. Because I don't know. If I feel like you're gonna get a lot of joy from making me watch things, so therefore like. My choices, like I'm leaning towards films that I'm like, I'll rewatch that. That might be cool.
No, I've looked at the list I've got the other day, and I think some of the stuff I've been thinking of, like there are a few of them I know for a fact you've seen, but there are also a few that I'm not sure you've seen at all. Like for example, Little Shop of Horrors. Have you ever seen that one?
No.
Groundhog Day.
Yes.
Yeah?
Recently.
Really interesting. I love that movie.
Yeah, I had a real aching to rewatch it, and I rewatched it in this house. So
wow, that's isn't that such a great movie? That movie is timeless, and I mean that in the truest sense of the word. Well, I mean, maybe we'll get to. Beetlejuice. Have you seen Beetlejuice?
No.
See, I'd love for you to see Beetlejuice. I'm so curious as to it's not one I have a huge nostalgia for, like Short Circuit. So I think it's going to be really interesting to rewatch that one in the cold light of being, in my 30s. So there's a few that I've chosen because I can't, like, Beetlejuice is a good example. It's on my list of things that we might get to at some point because I'm curious about rewatching it.
There's pressure from my work for you to pick The Goonies.
See, now, you know what? I've got to hold my hands up. I've seen The Goonies. I've seen The Goonies multiple times as a kid, but it was not one of my, like, burn the VHS into the ground movies. I enjoyed it for what it was, and I remember I saw it on TV once and was like, yeah, that's fun. And I remember watching it a couple more times, but I don't think it's one I like... The movies I really loved as a kid, like, I ruined the VHSs. Like, they would not play after a while because I watched them so much. Because I was an indoor kid for sure. So
oh mate, I feel such a kinship when you describe, like, and I'm sure if it was you feel the same, listeners, when you describe taping, like the art of, like, I had just boxes and boxes and boxes. Full of home recorded.
Mine still exist. They're in the attic of my parents' home.
Yeah, same. Yeah, absolutely. Same here. And I would you'd have to find a VHS player that worked, and a lot of the tapes wouldn't work now, apparently. They don't hold up.
It wasn't like VHS recording when you did it yourself, like, way less functional than, like, a properly printed video. So, like, if you bought it should still work, but if you recorded it, they're easily demagnetized.
Yeah, I think so, something like that. But apparently, a lot of like bought ones are also failing now.
Oh, crazy!
It
was a bad technology. It was a bad format. Why is the only reason that anyone thinks there's a that VHSs need to come back is because vinyl worked. The reason vinyl worked is because that is actually a very good format. The music sounds a very specific way on vinyl that you can't recreate any other way. It does not work for VHS. It's bad. It's a shit format.
So I would love one day, like I might do it one day, just find a VHS. Well, Mum and Dad have still got one, I think, and just watch through it and just be like, man, why did I record this? Because because I don't know what I'd find. Like that's the thing. Because like at one point I'd have found Power Rangers.
Yeah.
Then at another point I'd have found Kenan and Kel or Boy Meets World.
Yep.
Then at another point it would have been Only Fools and Horses. But then I had Only Fools and Horses on actual tapes.
So I had friends on actual tapes, so I had no reason to record.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So what's on the recorded shit? Like, is it like comic relief nights and stuff? Like, so fascinating.
I mostly, for some reason, when it came to my collecting in terms of recording, TV shows, because they were always in syndication, I was never worried about being able to get hold of those episodes at a later date, so I didn't record a lot of TV to rewatch. But I definitely recorded at Christmas, getting the Christmas TV guide and planning out what films I was finally going to get to have a copy of because I knew they were going to air. Like going like, okay, Jurassic Park 3 is airing here or whatever, Jurassic Park 2 or something. Like I'll circle that. I'll record that because it's finally going to air on TV. Men in Black, that's going to finally air on TV. I'll circle that. Well, I'll finally get a copy of that on tape that I can watch myself. Those sort of movies, like that's a big thing. There's one movie that we're going to talk about. It's on my list. I'm not even going to name it here because I want it to be a bit of a surprise when it comes up. Is a movie that is utterly forgotten. It's on no one's nostalgia lists. It's a movie that I saw by accident because I taped something else and it was on after it and the video just taped through and I watched the thing I intended to tape and then this other random thing came on and I utterly fell in love with it. It's kind of obscure. I'm pretty sure you won't have even heard of it. And I am so excited at some point to show it to you. I might make that my next pick for when we come back round to me.
Yeah, and that is kind of. I think a lot of people will be like Space Jam. Yep, Short Circuit, Mouse Hunt.
Yeah,
right.
and so, I think that's going to be true of my next choice. The thing I think is going to be my next choice, but I'm not settled on it yet because you've also still not seen Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and I think that's a big one. No. That's a great movie. Yeah. Who Framed Roger Rabbit, it does everything that Space Jam tried to do well. So I really want to, and also the only time we will ever see Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny share screen time.
Yeah, that's very true. Well, for now, next up, Space Jam. Mouse Hunt. Mm-hmm. And thank you very much for checking this out.
Yeah. We and if you're enjoying this, of course, review, like, comment, all the good stuff. We have a Patreon, patreon.com/nothingbutstatic if you'd like to give us money. Help keep the lights on, as they say. There's no real benefits to that at the moment, but I'm thinking about making these episodes available on there early. Because this isn't like core content. I don't feel like we're robbing anyone. Like I feel if our main podcast that people listen to, Nothing But Static or Steven University, if we did those like that, people might have objections and they'd be right. I think because this is kind of a side project, I think we're free to just maybe make this available early on Patreon. Yeah. So if you're enjoying this, you can probably get episodes of this early on the Patreon. Not figured out how I'm going to do that yet. I've got to go through the logistics. But thank you so much for listening. Please do all of the things I just mentioned, reviewing and liking and subscribing and all that jazz. And in the meantime, we'll see you in a week or a couple of weeks' time to discuss Mouse Hunt. So yeah,
there you go.
Thanks and goodbye.
Wait, you ready? You ready for this?
I'll go.
This review has been rewound. No, didn't
Right. What I need to is okay. It's over. If you want to listen to this again, you got to play the sound effect of a tape whizzing round and wait 30 minutes.
Let's try and do it with the Dan Doolans and the Chris Billinghams. Go, give that a go.
Oh, we did the normal.
So I've been Chris Billingham.
I've been Dan Doolan.
And this review has been rewound.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, there you go.
I'd give you a high five, but we're not in the same room, so.
Well, we'll both clap on the count of 3. So 1, 2, 3, clap. Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
1, 2, 3.
Beautiful.